Hello, and welcome to History on Blast, episode 20, No Business Like Show Business. In today's episode, we're going to be putting Thomas Edison on blast. Pretty sure I've done that one before, but this time we're going to be talking about his influence on the motion picture industry, and specifically why him being an asshole means we have Hollywood in California today. But first, this month in history. In all of U.S. history, only 2 presidents have ever been formally impeached. Impeachment is roughly analogous to an indictment and can only be enacted by the lower house of the legislature, though it can be turned against any civil official and not just the president. They then face a hearing in the upper house. Speaking on a federal level, the lower house would be the House of Representatives and the upper house would be the Senate. On February 24th, 1867, the House officially voted to impeach President Andrew Johnson for his dismissal of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton in defiance of the Tenure of Office Act. He was, however, acquitted, and they failed to remove him from office by just 1 vote. Okay, so let's talk about Thomas Edison. You know him. I love to hate him. Supposed inventor of the light bulb, but actually just vaguely improver on the pre-existing and 50 years old, at the time, light bulb. But, he gets credit for basically everything, and the guy had 1,093 patents, so go off, I guess. In the early 1900s, he had already developed the motion picture camera. Not to say that his is the first. There's actually several other motion picture cameras that predate Thomas Edison, but he held the patent in the US because patents are nationally based unless you file the patent in multiple countries. So it doesn't matter that people in France already had a patent on a moving picture camera because they didn't file for a patent in the US before Edison did. Now, this is where things get a little Edison-y, because he's an asshole. He forms the Motion Picture Patents Company in New Jersey. And the intention of this was to have a company that was a governing body to control the patents that he had over the motion picture industry. Which, alright, cool, whatever. It's how you do the thing. Capitalism, go make the money, hold the patents, control them. Aside from the part where an important part of this is that usually, especially in a patent for a creative medium like film, you would license that patent and let other people also make movies, which would be making you money because you own the patent to literally the camera. Awesome. But that's not how Thomas Edison do. Because he decided that he would be the only one who made movies. Well, him and the very specific people he said, it's okay if you do the thing. So he had a few other film studios that were local that were part of the Motion Picture Patents Company. But anybody who was an independent developer, anybody who wanted to be working on their own, who didn't want to be involved with Edison, who, even if they were using a different kind of camera, they were getting a lot of shit from Edison. There was actually another company called Biograph, who used a completely different kind of camera. The Biograph camera had its own patents. It didn't fall under any of Edison's. And he actually took them to court trying to, because they held a patent on another piece of the camera. And he was trying to say that patent was invalid. He lost the suit, by the way. Biograph won. But as a result of this, a lot of these independent filmmakers and the Biograph company decided to move west because they wanted to get away from Thomas Edison's Motion Picture Patents Company, which was in New Jersey. which up until this point, New Jersey had been the home of early motion pictures, which is really wild because then you think if this hadn't happened, and if Thomas Edison wasn't a massive steaming pile of shit, New Jersey could be Hollywood. And, like, Jersey is... it's Jersey. Can you just think about it with the culmination of, like, the glitz and the glamour that we associate with modern Hollywood mixed with the essence that is Jersey Shore. It's kind of Cthulhian in how terrifying and unknowable the beast that is New Jersey Hollywood would be. But thankfully for our collective sanity and motion picture history, they moved to Hollywood. Now, technically, they didn't go to Hollywood first. They actually went to the Los Angeles area. And they started to then move to Hollywood. Specifically, they started in Edendale, which is just east of Hollywood. And that was the Selig Polyscope Company. And then later, the filmmaker David Horsley and his general manager Al Christie in 1911 built the actual first motion picture studio in Hollywood itself on the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Gower Street. By 1913, you had Cecil B. DeMille. By 1917, you had the Charlie Chaplin Studio. And then you start to get, the names that we associate with early Hollywood. And you start to get the trappings therein. And none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the fact that Thomas Edison was a massive tool. So let's real quick hit on what happened to Thomas Edison's Motion Picture Patents Company, because you may notice they don't make movies in Jersey anymore, and you've probably never heard of the Motion Picture Patents Company, and that's because it got put out of business entirely. So not only had Edison been going after other filmmakers with patent infringement lawsuits, he had also been going after them with the mob, which, while not important to the downfall of the MPPC, it is just a crucial anecdote in truly understanding the horrible, horrible man that is Thomas Edison. Seriously, you don't understand how much I hate him. Okay, so then we have Eastman Kodak, which everyone knows Kodak, right? We know the name, we love the name. There's a few other comedic incidents involving Kodak through history, like the time they realized that the entire US was just kind of being rained on with nuclear fallout because all of their film stock was bad. That was fun. But at this point in history, they have the patent on raw film stock, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, is extremely important to motion pictures. It's very important. And for a long time, the Motion Picture Patents Company had a contract with Kodak to be exclusive, meaning that these independent filmmakers couldn't get their hands on Kodak film stock. Well, things changed in 1911 when Eastman Kodak modified that exclusive contract, and that meant that anybody could get their hands on this film stock now. You also get an extremely important mistake on the part of the Motion Picture Patents Company, which is that they overestimated how efficient it would be to use litigation to control their patents. Now, okay, yes, they were also using mob violence, which is slightly more efficient than a courtroom, I suppose, but significantly less legal. But the issue with patent litigation is that it's really slow. You have to investigate it, you have to have proof, then you have to go to court, and then everything has to get settled, and in that whole time, who knows what's happening. So then in 1912 and 1913, we get a pretty major change, which is that up until now, the Motion Picture Patent Company had been selling single reel films, which is about 20 minutes. And the independent companies had started to make multiple reel long. They had developed the feature-length film. And the Motion Picture Patent Company didn't make those changes. And by this point, Biograph had actually become part of the Motion Picture Patent Company. But Edison, Biograph, SNA, and Vitagraph, who are all part of the MPPC, didn't make any feature-length films. They until 1914 is when they released their first ones. And the independent filmmakers and the foreign imports had hundreds out by this point. And the audiences were eating it up, because why would you watch a 20-minute movie when you can get one that's an hour to an hour and a half long? And you start to get the idea that you see in the 1940s and the 1930s of getting the cartoon, the newsreel, the feature. And the MPPC just wasn't making that change. In September of 1913, the last of the patents that had been filed in the 1890s expired. And at that point, the MPPC finally lost their ability to control patents in the film industry. So all they had left was a subsidiary, which is the General Film Company. So they had a monopoly on film distribution. In 1914, we get the outbreak of World War I. At this point, this cuts off the foreign film market entirely. With the state of the Atlantic Ocean, with the early German U-boats, and the sinking of ships pretty much a constant threat. And this is before you have the advent of transatlantic flight as an easy means of trade. There is no way to bring movies to the US from Europe, even if there was really anybody to make them, because it's World War I and everyone is fighting the Great War, because that's what we do. So that seems like it would be a really big problem for the film industry, and it was a problem for the Motion Picture Patents Company, because most of the companies involved in it were foreign. So all of the independent studios out in California who were concentrated on making Westerns were fine. Because Westerns, they were making them entirely for the US markets. They didn't care what Europe was doing. Europe could be doing anything. We're making cowboy movies. But the true end of the Motion Picture Patents Company and Thomas Edison's death grip on the film industry, that had admittedly been waning, finally came on October 1st of 1915 with a federal court decision in the case United States versus Motion Picture Patents Company, where they ruled that the actions of the MPPC went far beyond what was necessary to protect the use of patents or the monopoly which went with them. And they declared it was an illegal restraint of trade under the Sherman Antitrust Act. And they finally terminated the company in 1918, which ended Edison's influence on film forever and cemented Hollywood as the true home of the motion picture. That's going to just about wrap things up this week, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I figured it was a timely topic, since by the time this is dropped, the Oscars just happened. And really, I will take literally any opportunity to hate on Thomas Edison and his habit of stealing things from other people and doing very little work for a whole lot of credit. Really, I hate this man. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to describe it. I just do. It's a fact of life. But anyway, if you like what you're hearing, please leave a rating and a review on iTunes or the podcast catcher of your choice. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, if you have memes about how much you also hate Thomas Edison, you can find me on Twitter at historyonblast, or you can find me at my email address at historyonblast@gmail.com. If you are interested in some more of those history memes that I just mentioned, you can find the group on Facebook, which is the History on Blast discussion group, which sounds a lot more serious than it is, I suppose. I should probably change the name to something with a little bit more fun and frivolity, because that's kind of the vibe. As always, thank you to Defy the Mall for the use of their song Keeper of Histories for the intro and outro of our program. And thank you.